2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson.
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
And Gerhard Mathangani.
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
For WKXX Live, these guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
It is a Tuesday. Welcome in. WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Hope you're having a great day today. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani, we are along with you for the next 2 hours until 4 o'clock. You can listen to us, of course, on 102.9 FM. Also on WKXX.com. Also YouTube and Facebook Live. Just search WKXX Live there on YouTube, and you can watch our show live there. We've got quite a bit to cover on the show today. Got a great lineup of guests today. We're going to talk with Jed May coming up in about 30 minutes. He covers the Georgia Bulldogs for Rivals, UGAsports.com. So we'll get a glimpse into the Georgia Bulldogs as it is game week for the college football playoffs. We'll talk with Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 coming up at 3 o'clock. He covers SEC basketball. Conference play begins tomorrow, so we'll preview those games with Blake Lovell. And then Brad Logan of Inside the Rebels 24/7 Sports will join us as Ole Miss takes on Texas Tech in the Texas Bowl tomorrow. We'll talk Ole Miss Rebels with Brad Logan. So a lot to jump into today, Gerhard, on a day where we've got kind of a full day of football. We got some on in the studio right now with some bowl games. Yeah. But lots of football this week, and I think it's kind of preparing us, giving us a week of football, preparing us for what's going to be a fun Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. With the playoffs starting on Saturday, Alabama kicking off hours before that, you get a nice full slate. We haven't had one of these full slates probably since the last week of the regular season, because I'm not even really counting the conference championship week. So, yeah, it's going to represent what we all kind of know and love and what we gear up for in August and September. It'll feel a little bit like that come bowl season, as bowl season continues over the weekend. Nice little slate today. We'll have a few more over the course of the week, but this is a fun one. This is a fun week, in my opinion, of the bowls, because you have still some of the glorified bowls, some of the New Year's Six bowls, and then the playoff as well. So you get a little chance to sprinkle in all levels before we crown a champion.
Yep, we got a bowl game going on right now in the fourth quarter as Buffalo leads Georgia Southern 23-14. Now, Georgia Southern was that team we saw get a big win to start the year.
Yeah.
And, of course, Clay Helton is their head coach coming from USC and is in his first year at Georgia Southern. So you got the Bulls of Buffalo leading the Eagles of Georgia Southern right now, as that is taking place down in Montgomery in the Camellia Bowl.
Yeah, I don't think things have really been the same since UAB and Georgia Southern played. Georgia Southern knocked off Nebraska, riding that high, beat them by a large scoring margin as far as the overall game score, 45-42. But then they lost to UAB right after that, and I feel like their season kind of went up and down. But all in all, really solid season for Clay Helton and his bunch, and so looking to see if they can, finish off their year with a win. But Buffalo right now having their way with them, so coming all the way from the New York area. I'm sure they're glad they're here instead of at home.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen some video from Buffalo. It is unbelievable. I watched some video of the Buffalo Bills players leaving the facility, and they had Tahoes with snow. Not even kidding, like 3 feet higher than their vehicle is how crazy it was over there. So I'm sure the Bulls are glad to be here, and so far so good, knocking off the Eagles as we sit here late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Coming up following the Camellia Bowl is the First Responder Bowl. That is Memphis versus Utah State. That game will be coming up at scheduled for 2:15 on ESPN, but following the Camellia Bowl, and then at 5:45 you've got the Birmingham Bowl there at Protective Stadium in Birmingham. Coastal Carolina, East Carolina. that's a good matchup to take place there in the Birmingham Bowl.
Yeah, some of these teams, a lot of teams, when you get to this part of the bowl season, a part of you kind of forgets what they did in the regular season.
Yeah.
Like, you get here, like, what was Memphis like again this year? But then once you get to bowl season, you start to refresh yourself about the kind of year some of these teams had. And so, the bowl season really makes for a lot of these interesting matchups. And if you live in the state of Alabama, we've got 2 bowl games right here in the heart of Dixie, and you have a good chance to see East Carolina and Coastal Carolina, 2 really reputable football teams and 2 reputable programs over the course of the last few years, duke it out there at the really nice facility over there in Birmingham, Progressive. And so, in my opinion, two really solid games. And I think that the Chanticleers and the Pirates will give us a nice one there in Birmingham. East Carolina, a 7-point favorite there in that matchup. And so, you have the team that won 7 games being favored over the team that won 9. But of course, ECU plays in what's considered the tougher conference there between the 2 teams.
Yep. And so that game coming up at, again, 5:15 there from Protective Stadium, 5:45 tonight on ESPN. Then the late game at 9:15 tonight, you've got the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, Wisconsin and Oklahoma State. So late game, but should be a good one there is the Badgers and the Cowboys.
This one should be really interesting because when you think about both these teams, the very first thing that pops in my head is change. Because you have to think about all the change Wisconsin has gone through. Obviously, working through, a new staff, and then Oklahoma State, they're going through a situation where they don't have the quarterback that's been there for the last 4 years, Spencer Sanders, who's entered the transfer portal. And so this is a really interesting situation here for 2 really well-respected programs, 2 teams that obviously in the Power 5. Oklahoma State for a large part of the year was ranked. The wheels fell off a little bit towards the end of the year for the Cowboys, but Mike Gundy and his team always usually has a pretty good product on the field. Wisconsin, we know that they like to travel. They play really well. So this one will be a really interesting one. Of all the games that I think on today's slate for teams and programs to catapult themselves to the 2023 season, this would be the game that I think you'll see a lot more of the confidence imbued from this game as we look forward to next year.
I wonder how many. I think this is going to be a good game, but I wonder how many people are going to watch tonight at 9:15. That's a late time slot for this type game.
Oh, no doubt. And to be honest with you, it's a situation where I know the bowl games. You kind of want as many of these bowl games to have their own timing, their own window. But 9:15 on a weeknight is really late. I know a lot of the kids are out of school right now, but a lot of the parents are still working, and so. We'll see the ratings on that one. But, that kickoff time to me I thought was really interesting being as late as it was.
Some other news around college football outside of the bowl games. Maryland tight end CJ, do you know how to say his last name?
Deepray, I believe.
Deepray?
I think it's Deepray.
CJ Deepray is transferring to Alabama from Maryland. He's entered the transfer portal, and he is coming to the Crimson Tide. Good addition. I think Alabama needed a solid guy in that tight end position, and I think Deepray is going to provide that for Alabama.
Yeah, Bama's been looking for this in the transfer portal. Bama's looking for this from guys that they've signed for a really long time. The guy, his name escapes my mind. He came in from North Carolina, had a really strong season at tight end a couple of years ago. Didn't get the same production from Cameron Latu as they probably thought they would have this past year. But the tight end is a really important position, I think, to what Alabama does because most typical Alabama teams like to do a lot downfield outside the numbers. So to keep defenses honest, you like to have guys that can go across the middle. So we'll see if the Maryland tight end can provide that. But I always find it interesting, the Maryland to Alabama connections, whether a guy's going from Alabama to Maryland, which we've seen a couple of those, and now the other way around with former Alabama offensive coordinator Mike Locksley there and former Alabama quarterback Talia Tagovailoa also there for the Terrapins. So that pipeline's always been interesting one way to the other, but we're now seeing it from the Terrapins down to Tuscaloosa.
Yep. Another piece of transfer portal news. Wake Forest, of course, playing in the bowl game last night. Their quarterback Sam Hartman plans to enter the transfer portal. Now, what's interesting about Sam Hartman, and he was out, I believe it was the first part of Was it this season that he was out? Or was
Yes,
that?
yeah. I believe it was either this season or maybe either the towards the end of last season. I'll go check his game log, but yeah, I remember he did suffer an injury,
Yeah.
which made things kind of tough for the Deacons.
Yeah, and but he is entering the transfer portal, and it is expected that Notre Dame is where he is going to end up. Now, how we know this when he hasn't officially entered the transfer portal yet is beyond me, but it is expected that he will go to Notre Dame.
And it's really interesting because as many times as people, and I'm sometimes guilty of this myself, of telling Jimbo Fisher to shut up because sometimes he just talks to me out of pocket. There are some times where he makes some great points, this being one of them. One of the things he talked about was when a guy enters the transfer portal and automatically knows exactly where he's going to go, you mean to tell me there hasn't been any conversations between the two parties? And I'm not saying that there has been between Wake Forest and Notre Dame. And he might just have a buddy on the team that he talks to all the time. So, obviously don't want to, say things that I don't, obviously don't know without sourcing. But according to all the sources, he's going there. But all the outside evidence will, make you question like, hey, how does he already know? How does he know that there's a spot open for him? How does he know that there's interest in him at all? And so, yeah, we'll find out what Hartman does. But that'd be really interesting because, obviously Notre Dame losing their quarterback, Pike, entering the transfer portal as well. I expect to see this a lot. This is a guy that threw for 3,700 yards, 38 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, really good numbers overall. And if he can add his talents to a really good recruiting class that they had, things could look up for the Irish.
Yeah, they sure could. So that'd be a good pickup. But Sam Hartman, Wake Forest quarterback, plans to enter the transfer portal and expected to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. We'll jump to a break here. We'll talk Alabama next. Nick Saban had a chance to go to the podium as they arrived in New Orleans yesterday afternoon. They began practice today in the Superdome. We'll talk Alabama football in preparation for the Sugar Bowl next. Jed May from UGAsports.com joins us at 2:30. All of that and more as we roll on this Tuesday afternoon. It is WKXX Live.
Employment First.
It is WKXX Live here on Fox Sports 102.9. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. 256-413-1029 is our phone number. Jason Gerhard here with you until 4 o'clock. We got Jacksonville State basketball coming up for you tonight. 5:30 is the countdown to tip off. Mike Parrish will be along with you to get you ready for Jacksonville State and Georgia Southwestern coming up tonight. Again, 6 o'clock tip. 5:30 airtime for the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. We start off this segment. We'll go to the phone. So we got Van on with us. Van, how are you? Hope you had a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, pretty uneventful. Went to Waffle House last year. This year I just went to the gas station, got a bunch of junk food. Had to have something to eat. Nothing's open.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to get off track a little bit. I'm sure y'all talked about this when I wasn't listening about Dansby Swanson. Did he have the same representation of the guys that Freddie fired?
Yes, he did. It was the same guy, same group.
I don't think Alex likes those people too much.
I don't think so either.
I don't. But it seemed to me like he had totally didn't intend to ever sign Dansby long term. Of course, I'm sure he made an offer a few years, but sure going to miss him. He seemed to be a team leader as well as a pretty darn good shortstop. Had a good year last year. What do y'all feel about that?
Yeah, I think, to me, it's one of those things where I think that the Braves knew that they weren't going to go long term, and they knew that if they could just, and this is speculation here, they knew that if they could just fake it, that they were trying to re-sign him, they'd get another team to go for the more years that they were looking for, because there were going to be more teams out there to give him that 5th year, 6th year, 7th year, and they were going to just play the game as if they were going to, but the whole plan on the back end was just to groom somebody else. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I think that the Braves had no intention to sign him for more than 5 years.
I don't have any intention. I agree with you on that. And they signed so many, they wrapped the young guys up. Some of them, comparatively to what guys are getting, seem like pretty good deals for the Braves. I mean, Austin, they all make it next millions, but compared to some of the contracts, Austin wasn't too bad. And the center fielder and the second baseman. But who are we going to get to play shortstop? What's the plan on that?
I think the plan is Vaughn Grissom to step in. According to Alex Anthopoulos, they like what they've seen from Vaughn Grissom in the offseason, and he could be the guy for shortstop.
Well, maybe it'll work out. There's a big difference in shortstop and second base. So
Yeah, there's a huge difference.
Yeah, you got to have a strong arm. You got a lot of ground to cover. Now you can't do the squirt. Well, how y'all feel about that? I'm kind of glad they did away with that personally.
Yeah, the switching part will be the most interesting part about this, because I do think that it'll make that position a little bit easier. Not the easiest thing in the world, but it'll make it a little bit easier. I think it's going to be harder for a little bit for maybe your third baseman to be able to help out there, and communication has to be very, very good between your third and your short. But honestly, I think it's interesting, because you just can't go out and just scout a player and say, hey, let's basically put a fourth outfielder out here, or make the shift all the way over against either a left or right-handed guy. It'll be really interesting, and I think we probably should talk to some baseball people to find out, how each position will be affected, with this being in place, because we've seen this shift last 20 years, and especially the last 10 be a major part of defensive strategy.
They used to just use it very sparingly back in my younger days. Maybe a Willie Stark or somebody was a strictly full hitter, and they would shift as dramatically. Maybe shortstop, he was a left-handed hitter, behind second base. But they've been playing baseball for 100 years, and I kind of like to, stay in your spot. You can move over. A few feet. I guess the rule is you can't pass the bag, right? Either way, second base or shortstop. shortstop or third baseman can't go past second.
Mm-hmm. And then also shortstop. Nobody can be in the grass pre-pitch, I believe, as well. Like your basically you can't have like your shortstop lined up in that short shallow of the outfield.
Okay, I didn't know that was part of the rule. Well, all right. I think the Tide can handle Kansas State. Kansas State's pretty darn good.
They are. They're going to have to be ready to play. And mindset has to be focused on that game for sure. And I think they can win. But, yeah, I think it could be a challenge for sure. Kansas State's good. From what I saw in the Big 12 championship from Kansas State, yeah, they're good.
Yeah, they scored some points. I hope their defense shows up. And it was good to see that Will and the quarterback's playing.
Yeah.
Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly hope they don't get hurt, but I'm sure they bought a large insurance policy. They both had a lot of NIL money to afford that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Good talking to you. Happy New Year.
Happy
Likewise.
New Year to you. Thanks for calling. Always enjoy talking with you.
Great stuff, man.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the call there. Kind of transitioning to Alabama and Kansas State coming up Saturday there in the Sugar Bowl. And Van brought it up. Bryce and Will playing. We were wondering, and they came out with that last week that they would indeed play in the Sugar Bowl. They've been practicing starting today there, and Nick Saban spoke on that in his availability yesterday. Just the importance of having Bryce Young, having Will Anderson's leadership there in the locker room.
It's twofold. Number one, you have your best players playing in the game. Secondly, it sends a message to everybody else on the team that, hey, if your two best players who are going to be first-round draft picks in the NFL, if they're playing, if they're busting their butts, if they are doing what they need to do to be able to prepare and get themselves ready for the NFL draft through playing, then you should too. So I think this kind of works out in Coach Saban and the coaching staff's favor a large part because the leadership doesn't sound hollow. The leadership sounds real with those guys being out there and those guys really preparing and being with their teams.
I think both guys have been tremendous leaders on our team. They're both captains on our team. I think they feel sort of a responsibility to being a part of the team and have a tremendous amount of respect for their teammates, which I think probably weighed into their decision, to play. I do think that both guys see the fact that you really create value for yourself when you play football. There's a lot of guys out there that saying, I'm not playing because I'm going to get ready for the draft. Well, how do you get better ready for the draft? By playing in a game against good competition. And I think both those guys sort of realize that. And we've done everything that we could do as an institution to minimize the risk for them to play. So, and I think it's a great example for college football that guys that are special players who had great seasons and have won numerous awards choose to continue to play and support their team.
Nick Saban there on Bryce Young, Will Anderson, excuse me, the importance of them playing coming up this week. He also spoke on just making sure the mindset is still there. And we talked about this yesterday with Jimmy Stein, just the fact that they've got to be ready. Even though this is not a playoff game, this is not where technically they want to be, they've got to have the right mindset heading into this bowl game.
Yeah, for sure, certainly. And it's one of those things where, yeah, you have to attack it both ways. You have to attack it from the talent standpoint, but then you also have to attack it from the execution standpoint and being there from a mentally, engaged and prepared. And so far, Coach Saban likes what he sees.
I think that sometimes you have a feeling by how the players prepare, what their focus is in meetings, how in tune they are to sort of having the mental intensity and energy in practice and how they prepare for the game, because if they're doing the things the right way, that sort of shows you that they have the right mindset. So usually you have a pretty good feeling going into the game that you're going to play well. But, games are funny things. All sports and all games have huge swings in momentum. I watched a couple NFL games the last couple days, And I saw huge swings in momentum where one team would be dominating and then something happens, like the Dolphins game was a great example. You know, they could have gone up 3 scores, they fumble and turn it over right before the half. They were never the same team after that. So sometimes you're ready to play a game and you go out and execute very well, but you got to be able to recapture the momentum in the game when things don't go well. You got to be able to overcome adversity. So even though you may practice and prepare and start out really well, you've got to be able to maintain that intensity and that momentum for 60 minutes in the game, regardless of what happens in the game. Whether things go well or something bad happens, you've got to be able to overcome it. But I think that's one of the great things about athletics. I think that's one of the great things about football is learning how to overcome adversity is probably one of the great lessons in life that will help you be more successful in life, because things don't always go exactly like we plan them to. And I think that's one thing that you can learn from being involved in a team sport, especially.
Nick Saban there as his team getting ready for the Sugar Bowl coming up on Saturday. We got to jump to a break because Jed May from UGAsports.com will join us next. Talk some Georgia Bulldogs.
The Press Box.
It is WKXX Live on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathengani along with you on this Tuesday afternoon. And we're getting ready for college football playoff coming up this weekend. You got Georgia and Ohio State on Saturday. To talk more Georgia Bulldogs with us, we welcome on Jed May. He covers Georgia football for UGAsports.com there with Rivals. Jed, really appreciate you coming on with us this afternoon. How are you?
Doing good. Media festivities have really got going today and yesterday. So, glad y'all have me on.
Well, I think this is an interesting matchup, Georgia and Ohio State. Of course, Ohio State coming in as the 4 seed into the playoffs. Georgia, of course, number 1 after another great regular season, winning the SEC. Just your initial thoughts as you saw that this was going to be the matchup, Georgia and Ohio State. What's kind of your expectations, 4 or 5 days out of this game?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we all remember watching how that conference championship Saturday unfolded, and we were all kind of wondering, could Georgia end up playing TCU, who, I think Georgia fans would say that they would rather face TCU than Ohio State. But that being said, I think there are some areas that Georgia can exploit in this game. I think they're going to try to run the ball. We all saw what Michigan did to Ohio State on the ground, especially in the second half. And then defensively, I think you look at C.J. Stroud. He's a guy who's got athleticism, got legs, but he's not – I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a dual threat in the mold of a Bo Nix or a Hendon Hooker, some other guys Georgia's faced this year. So I think Georgia's going to try to pressure him, get in his face, especially up the middle with Jalen Carter. And those guys are really trying to throw off him and all those talented receivers Ohio State's got. Yeah,
no doubt. One of the things that Georgia, to me, has been the most interesting follow this year has been offensively. The return of Stetson Bennett, a lot of people, I think, might have been surprised at the level he played at last year. This year, not that much of a surprise. Brock Bowers seems to be great. What about the offense right now seems to be clicking to you? We know Kirby's got the defense, but what specifically about the offense do you think can take this team to a championship?
I think the only thing that can really stop this offense is itself, or at least that's how they've been playing. When Georgia's been playing its worst this year, it's been because of turnovers. They've had a weird run of fumbles even, which is just a weird kind of fluky thing. So the running game has gotten going over the last month and a half. They're averaging about 219 yards a game, rushing over the last 6 games, put up 255 on the ground against LSU. So the offensive line is really rounding into form. And when you look at those kind of things, if they avoid turning the ball over, I think this is a game where they'll be able to put up, 31, 35, 42 points on Ohio State. And that's kind of the number where if you get there, that you're going to feel really good about your chances to win, especially if you're Georgia with the defense they've got.
Absolutely, and with that defense, of course, Kirby is really a defensive genius, as we've seen his time as a coordinator and now as a head coach. What has stood out to you about this defense, and maybe some guys that you've seen this year really step up and help make this defense what they are, especially the losses from last year to the NFL, and them just being able to rebuild back to this power defense?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. When you look at all the 5 draft picks off a defense period means you got a pretty good defense. 5 first-round draft picks is phenomenal. And, coming into the season, I think people kind of thought by this time in the year, Georgia would be able to be playing pretty well on defense. But they've been playing great since day one against Oregon when they just dominated them in Mercedes-Benz. So you look at inside linebacker with Smile Mondon and Jamon Dumas-Johnson, who have filled the roles of Nakobe Dean and Clay Walker, Channing Tindall. Those guys have played great. True freshman Malachi Starks has, he came in the second possession of the game against Oregon, gets an interception, and takes off running with that safety job, and has started pretty much all year. And then up front, Jalen Carter, he got hurt against Oregon. He came back against Missouri, got hurt in that game. So he's really only been 100% for, I'd say, probably 3 or 4 games. But he has just taken this Georgia defense to another level with the way he just punishes offensive lines in the middle, requires multiple guys to block. You've got to always know where he is. So his presence just makes everyone else on that defense that much better. They've been a really, really scary group over the last month and a half or so.
For sure. it seems to me that what Georgia's been able to do, both in recruiting and on the field, is really similar to what Kirby not only helped build, but also did at Alabama. As you kind of take a 1,000 feet look at what this program's been able to do over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then, of course, the last 2, how impressive is it to you, the level of production, both from a recruiting standpoint, the entire program, and put themselves back in a position to win the first ever back-to-back college football playoff championship?
It's amazing. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, what they've done on the recruiting, I mean, just take a look at the defensive classes that they've signed over the last 2 years, and there's 5 stars everywhere. And just the defensive back talent is insane, which makes sense with Kirby and Muschamp. I mean, it's insane what they're doing, and I think when you talk to these guys throughout the season, throughout the weeks, everyone in Athens is so bought into the process and the mentality of this program. And let's be honest, when in this world of NIL and the transfer portal and all this kind of stuff, you have, I think they do a good job of getting guys at Georgia who want to be there, who want to be developed. And look at the guys on defense last year. Jordan Davis was developed. Devontae Wyatt was developed. Kobe Dean developed. Christopher Smith seems like he's in his 10th year at Athens. Didn't really play that much his first 2 or 3 years, and now he's an All-American. I think they do a good job in recruiting of identifying those guys who want to follow that kind of process. And that's how you sustain success, guys who want to be developed. And when they do get developed, they've got the talent to, fill the shoes of the guys who left before them.
Jed May joining us from UGAsports.com there with Rivals. As we are getting set for what should be an exciting game Saturday in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl as Georgia takes on Ohio State. Jed, really appreciate you coming on with us this afternoon, talking some Georgia football. We will have to do it again real soon, but really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jed.
Jed May there covering Georgia football as the Bulldogs getting ready for Ohio State. A game that, and we talked about this yesterday. It's not the game we wanted to see.
Yeah.
It's not the team we wanted to see playing Georgia. I think there could be a lot of other teams to make this a really good game to start with. But interesting to see how Ohio State comes out in this one. I think we'll learn a lot of about do they deserve it in this game. We'll learn a lot in the first quarter because I think Georgia could go up, 3 touchdowns in the first quarter if they wanted to on this Ohio State team, just based off what we saw Michigan do to Ohio State. But I love Georgia's offense. I love Brock Bowers. I mean, I gave him my Player of the Year award when we did that a couple of weeks ago. I like what this Georgia offense can do. They could score a lot of points, and I like their chances of bringing home back-to-back.
It's crazy considering how great their defense was last year. Out of all the crazy offenses that we've seen over the last few years, the 2019 LSU team looked unreal. 2020 Alabama looked unbelievable. And then the defense, one of the best defenses in college football we've ever seen. And to have that much attention paid to what was an astounding defense. As we talk about this game, it's about the Georgia offense. The Heisman Trophy candidate is on the offense, not the defense. Last year it could have been any one of those defensive guys. This year it's the offensive guys. Yeah. To have that complete turnaround lets you know how complete of a program this is, and that's what he's building there, an incredible program. And I think if you're Georgia, you got to feel really good. And I don't disagree with Jed. I think the only team that could stop Georgia's offense is Georgia. Yeah. And Georgia's defense can stop anybody. So that means they got a pretty good chance to win this thing back to back. They still got to go earn it. Still got to go do it. One of the best quarterbacks in the entire country will be in that football game. But so far, I mean, I just don't see anybody beating Georgia outside of their own mistakes.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And you're right. Those mistakes can happen in this game or whether they make the national championship. But the chances of them doing that, they play at a high level. You hear Nick Saban and coaches say that all the time. They want to see their team play at a high level. Georgia plays at a very high level that not many teams can play at. And here they go with the number 2 recruiting class again. This isn't just going to stop when this group of guys leaves. No, Kirby's going to reload. Georgia is a team we're going to be talking about for a long time.
Yeah, the statement I always go back to is, what does your A+ look like? And if your A+ is better than somebody else's A+, and then if it's better by a long shot, then you got to be the favorite. And that's what I think Georgia is right now. Their A-plus game is so much better to me than anybody else left in the field. And now they can obviously go in and not play an A-plus game. But if they go in and look like they did against Missouri or Kent State, then yeah, anybody can beat them. Given the situation, I don't expect that.
Yep. Appreciate Jed May for joining us, talking some Georgia football from UGAsports.com. As the Bulldogs, they have arrived in Atlanta. Not a far trip for from Athens over to Atlanta, but they are there getting ready for the Peach Bowl coming up on Saturday against Ohio State. And they've played many a game there in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You know, for a while we were saying that was Alabama's home away from home, but I feel like Georgia plays more games there than they do at Sanford Stadium.
Yeah, they've turned that around. I mean, you always talk about the narratives changing. I think Clemson changed their narrative from the team that always kind of gets there and loses to the team that could win a little bit. And Georgia's kind of changed the narrative of that Mercedes-Benz, the old Georgia Dome, being kind of a death trap for them to, being a place where they really like to play, and they have another chance to punch a ticket back to the national championship game.
Yep, we'll preview that game more as we move through the week. Coming up next, want to talk a little Braves, including one local guy got a contract extension with the Braves. We'll talk about that next.
The Alabama Department
WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Jason Gerhard here with you. 256-413-1029 is our phone number. That is 256-413-1029. If you'd like to call in and be a part of the show, we'd love to hear from you today. The Braves signing former Oxford Yellow Jacket Jackson Stevens to a 1-year non-guaranteed split contract with the Braves organization. Now, you may be wondering what a non-guaranteed split contract is. That's I know it's a contract that will split between minors and majors, correct? With kind of a different salary on both ends.
Yeah, correct. So basically, it'll be a rate. The overall contract value will be $740,000. And that's the rate. And so the rate is $740,000. So depending on how many days you spend as a major league player as compared to a minor league player, it prorates the deal. So there's 183 days in the Major League Baseball season overall. However many of those days he gets on there is the cut of that $740K he'll get. So another chance, and he spent a large amount of time of the past few seasons on the Major League team, and I expect him to be part of the rotation again. But it also helps with depth for the Braves. It helps with some flexibility as well to be able to have this deal hit there with him. And I know for him, he obviously wants to stay, have a great season, and work his way maybe to even another contract going into next year. But it's good to see him back with the Braves this year and back with the organization where he's had a lot of good times and they've given him a chance and he's responded just about every time. Yeah, and the
40-man roster, I believe, is full now for the Braves with this signing. But great to see a local guy in Jackson Stevens be able to stay with the Braves and adding some depth. I mean, like you said, the Braves brought him up when they really needed him, and he came through in a very when the Braves really needed somebody to come through. He did. And so great to see him being able to stay with the Braves and hopefully can continue. I love his story. He was with the Reds and then went to, I believe it was the Canadian Baseball League and played, was the pitcher of the year and was able to come back with the Braves. And look where he finished the season with the big boys. Yeah, we got a chance to talk to Coach Wes Brooks of Oxford. And he said that he even helped out with some of the younger guys, kept himself fresh, kept himself ready, kept his body ready, and then he was able to get back out there on the major league level. And then last year, 39 appearances, a career high 53 2/3 innings, and a personal low for him, a 3.69 ERA. So it's one of those situations to where he kept himself ready, he was able to play, and he posted one of the best years of his career in the major leagues. Yeah, so great for Jackson Stevens. They're picking up a split contract with the Braves organization, and hopefully we'll see him on the hill some there in Atlanta with the Braves this year. But great for him to get that contract. We'll have Jacksonville State men's basketball for you tonight. Final non-conference game. That's exciting as Gamecocks will get ASUN play going on Friday against North Alabama. We've got Georgia Southwestern tonight, 6 p.m. tip, 5:30 airtime. But always good to know conference play right around the corner. Kind of the final tune-up tonight before you get ready for what I think is going to be a tough conference play. Really competitive ASUN. It was last year, expected to be again this year. You don't necessarily get anything out of the wins and losses in this one. You want to be able to start playing some good basketball, finding things that you can work on, finding things that will be the staples of what you do when conference play rolls around. So from a chemistry standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, how many minutes does this guy get? Is he better off the bench? Which group is this guy better with? Being able to attack it. Hey, when teams play big, we can go with this lineup. When teams play small, we can go with this lineup. It's these small last things that you're working on before that 18-game stretch, 9 home games, 9 road games in conference play to try to get yourself back to where they were last year, which is the big dance. Yeah, and interesting about the ASUN, North Alabama beat Ole Miss last week. Lipscomb beat Louisville last week. Right. You've got Jacksonville. They're playing Notre Dame tonight. They started off the season playing Duke. They've played a brutal schedule. Yeah, they have. Queens got to win. I don't remember Florida State. I think they beat Florida State to start the year. I mean, the ASUN is going to be That is a tough bout that the Gamecocks are starting this week.
You talk about being battle tested. None of these teams at all will fear anybody in conference compared to who they've played outside of conference. And even Jacksonville State, they've played the likes of Alabama and others as well. So, you have a really good opportunity to me to see a lot of great basketball. 9 games, as we mentioned, 9 games in conference will be played at Pete Matthews Coliseum. You never know which of those teams will be making the big dance. The team that made it, of course, last year was Jacksonville State, but a completely different team. So different team, different strategy. But I'm really excited about this year in conference play because I think we have a much more balanced, a much more even ASUN as we go back into it. And to me, I think every team will be a little bit different as well. JSU obviously hits the 3 ball really well. We'll have teams that battle it and punch it down low. It won't be carbon copies of one another. Every team will look a little bit different, which means you got to defend everything a little bit differently as well.
Yeah, Jacksonville State still trying to get some guys out of injury. That's been an issue for the Gamecocks. Guys like Amanzi Ngumezi has struggled with injury this year.
Yeah.
Peyton Daniels, he's a newcomer, was ASUN newcomer of the week a couple of weeks ago. He's struggled with some injuries. Cam McDowell has had some injuries. So once this Gamecock team is back in full force, I think they're going to be tough to reckon with. But got to get some of these guys back from injury. Hopefully they will be by Friday.
Yeah, I think they're so versatile that they can be able to withhold and withstand some of the kind of punches that come with being able to play at this level for a really long time. And Ngumezi represents a lot of size down low. He can guard a big, he can guard a smaller guy at the perimeter, really versatile player. So he'll be pivotal. And JSU, when they do run a smaller lineup, they can really rack up some points. And so it'll be interesting to see how they play this game as a final tune-up for what they have coming up in ASUN play when they get that kicked off.
Yep, so Jacksonville State basketball tonight against Georgia Southwestern to wrap up non-conference play. The Hurricanes of Georgia Southwestern out of the Division II. They're in the Peach Conference. They're in Division II, and they've got coming to the Gamecocks. They've never played a regular season game. They came to Jacksonville State for an exhibition last year, but this is the first time the two teams have met for a regular season game. You'll hear that 6 o'clock tonight right here on Fox Sports 102.9. We'll jump to a break here. We'll talk SEC basketball with Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 on the other side of this break.
The Press Box.
WKXX is live for the fastest 2 hours in sports talk radio. Get ready for Chase Robinson
He has got to be a player they can rely on in big situations.
and Gerhard Mathangani
Has the trust of his team. Sounds like the makeup of his team is in a really good space, and I believe that's because of the culture he's curated down there.
for WKXX Live. These guys have you covered from preps to pros and everything in between. Now, let's go inside the Fox Sports 102.9 studio with Chase and Gerhard for WKXX Live.
It is hour number 2 on this Tuesday afternoon. So glad you're joining us. Chase Robinson here, Gerhard Mathangani along with us as well. And so we're going to talk some SEC basketball now. We welcome on Blake Lovell with Southeastern14.com. Blake, always great to talk with you as we get ready for SEC conference play this week.
Yep, it is, guys. It started, of course, on Wednesday nights, and yeah, it'll be very interesting to see kind of how things get going early on here because the non-conference, I think, has kind of been a bit of a mixed bag for a lot of SEC teams, but yeah, finally good to see them playing each other. So,
when you look at the AP poll this week, of course, you've got Tennessee 7, Alabama 8, Arkansas 9, with 3 SEC teams right there together. Some others sprinkled in there as well. Would you say that Tennessee is the best SEC team as we head into conference play?
you know, I think that probably for me, I think Tennessee and Alabama are pretty even. I would maybe even give Alabama a little bit of a nod. I think they have maybe the most upside of the group of 3, but I don't want to discount Arkansas either because I think Arkansas is really good. And, you know, they lost Trevin Brazil, and that was kind of a big hit for them for the season. But still, I think they're good enough to win a lot of games and good enough to win the SEC. But I think Tennessee and Alabama, maybe 1A, 1B right now. Arkansas is not far behind. But, you know, Tennessee, it's more about the defense. They're probably the best defensive team in the country, and that'll always give them a chance, I think, to win some games. They still have some offensive, I think, inefficiencies there just in terms of they still have those stretches where they struggle to score. But in Alabama, they don't really have those, that they can score against anybody. And I think defensively this is a team that's a lot better. You know, sure, you can throw out the Gonzaga game. I think that was all a lot more about the Zags. But yeah, I think you've got to me, a clear top 3 with those 3 teams. Then I think you're looking at teams like Kentucky, you know, Auburn. I think that's probably the next part of that group.
Yeah, for sure. As we get rolling into SEC play, I find it really interesting just the overall matchups here that we have in this first weekend, weekend. Who, in your opinion, needs to get off to the better start, the best start they can, given, you know, what their expectations and everything else? We expect, you know, as you mentioned, those top 3 to be really good. But who do you expect to have a really good start to the season, maybe the first 5 games in conference?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly some teams that I think that need to do a little work. I mean, outside of, you know, the top teams can afford to have a few slip-ups early on, but I think you're probably looking at teams, you know, like, I mean, even a Mississippi State, I think is maybe the best choice here because, you know, you look at them, they got off to an 11-0 start, lost that game to Drake, they were in the top 15, you know, and then it's like, well, here's, you know, everybody's like, well, you really haven't played a hard schedule, which outside of Marquette, Utah, they haven't, but they get Alabama and Tennessee in their first 2 SEC games. You know, they get Alabama on Wednesday, they get Tennessee next Tuesday. And I think for them, you know, winning one of those games would probably give people a lot more confidence in them potentially being an NCAA tournament team. You lose both, you know, then it's like, okay, well, if you beat Ole Miss and Georgia, what does it really matter? So I think for them, getting one of these first 2 wins is probably as important for anyone. Just because I think that, you know, they're the next team in line. If the SEC is going to get 6 teams, I think, into the NCAA tournament, it's probably Mississippi State to this point, just based on what they've done. But, you know, you can also look at a team like Missouri, who, I mean, they got blown out by Kansas, but then came back and got a huge win against Illinois. And how did they start SEC play? They play Kentucky on Wednesday, and they go to Arkansas next Wednesday. So I think that's another team that kind of slip into that conversation, and are already there right now. But I think Mississippi State and Missouri are probably the 2 teams that really want to get off to a pretty good start here to kind of boost their overall resume a bit.
Those Mississippi State Bulldogs host Alabama tomorrow night to get conference play underway. What are some things that stick out to you about this specific matchup with the Tide, the Bulldogs?
Well, I mean, I do think it's, Mississippi State defensively, even in the losing streak, I mean, they held them to 58 points, and there's still only been one game this year. They've allowed more than 59 points, and, they won that game against Nicholls State. But, this is a team that is purely all about their defense. I don't know that they could score, I don't know how many SEC games they'll play in this year where they score more than 75 points, because I just don't think their offense is that good yet. Could it be? Maybe down the line, but I think right now it's just everything they do is going to be based around sort of methodical style of play, and they're just going to make you work defensively. And I think that's what Alabama is going to need to be, ready for, because it's, we know, right, the style that Alabama plays, they want to get up and down the floor, but Mississippi State's the kind of team that's going to make them work and really try to push the half-court type game. And we know these are two teams, that kind of play in a different way. And Mississippi State will need this, I think, to be a grinded-out 60-58 type game. Because if it gets on up there, I just don't think Mississippi State's good enough offensively to hang with a team like Alabama. So I think that's really what it's all about. It's all about the style, and whoever can kind of play their style. If Alabama gets the game going up and down the floor, I think they walk away with a pretty convincing win.
For sure. Let's go with the other team in the state of Alabama while we're talking, basketball in the state here with the Auburn Tigers. I think a lot of people had some questions in the early going. Well, now that all the football stuff is over, the recruiting day is done, and the coach is in, Auburn fans will now be paying more attention to how they'll be in the SEC. What do you make of the Tigers right now through the non-conference part of their schedule, and then as they get ready for this opener in the SEC against the Gators?
Yeah, I think Auburn's another team that's still kind of searching for its identity. I think defensively, you kind of know what to expect from them. They'll be one of the better defensive teams, not just in the SEC, but in the country, and we've kind of seen that to this point. But I think the problem is, offensively, it is what it is. They don't have a Jabari Smith this year. They don't have that one guy that you feel like, 100% every single time, every single game that you can go to for a sure basket. Now, I think Wendell Green has been really good offensively for them, and obviously they have some options with some of these other guys, but it's just not having like the guy, I think, can be something. It's nice to have a nice balanced team, which I think this Auburn team is, but sometimes you need a little more consistency, and I just think offensively they're not there yet either. It's not a great shooting team. They don't shoot the three well, they turn the ball over, not a great free throw shooting team. So if you add all that together in some of these big games, which we've seen against Memphis and USC, teams like that, it's been an issue at times. But on the flip side, I still think Auburn has a lot of upside when you see some of the guys that are, making key contributions, whether it's Chris Moore or Williams, like Jalen Williams, all these different guys. They're stepping up, and I think that's what you want to see is they have so many different options that you feel like even if you don't have a Jabari Smith, it's going to come out and get 30 points a game or something, you still have a lot of different guys to contribute. And I think that'll help them along the way. And they've got a pretty, I don't want to say easy start, but they've got a pretty nice schedule, I think, to open up SEC play. Play Florida, who's kind of struggled a bit. Go to Georgia, who I think is better than most people will give them credit for. But I think Auburn has a chance to get off to a pretty nice start here.
Arkansas has got LSU to start conference play tomorrow. Both teams 11-1. What should we look for in this year's LSU team?
Yeah, LSU is another team that I think a lot of people, I would say I'm probably higher on LSU than most people are. And you look at like the computers and such, and they're not as high on LSU. And the reason why is that they're not blowing people out. And, computers love that. The data loves to see you go out and blow out teams that it thinks you should blow out. And they played a lot of close games this year, but, they've won all of them but one. In the Kansas State game, they lost and actually had a shot at the buzzer until they had a clock malfunction, and the game didn't go to overtime based on that, so they lost that game by 2. Theoretically, you're talking about an 11-1 team here that has not played a tough schedule. But I still think, talent-wise, with a guy like KJ Williams, like I said, they do have a guy like that who, scored 35, 33, and 28 in 3 games this season. So you do have a guy like that. And so I think when you look at kind of LSU, they're pretty evenly balanced in terms of all the different areas that they can get contributions from a lot of these guys. So I don't think you're going to look at them as like an SEC title contender or anything like that, but they'll probably wind up being, to me, a bubble type team, that has some of those games where they look really good. Some of those other games where it's like, well, that definitely looks like a completely new roster, which it kind of is. And it doesn't help that the first half of their SEC schedule, honestly, guys, is probably one of the toughest I've seen in many years in the SEC. When you look down, I want to say it's like their first 8 or 9 games in the league. It's just a brutal stretch. Like you said, they start with Arkansas. They've got Kentucky, Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, Arkansas again, Missouri, Bama. It is a brutal stretch until about the last, the back half of their schedule, 6 or 7 games is, you won't call it easy, but much more manageable. So how they navigate this first half of it will tell us a lot about LSU.
Yeah. For the teams that are maybe had disappointing years last year that could bounce back this year, maybe some teams that are some surprises, some things to maybe look out for as far as slight improvement. Are any of those teams out there, do you think, or do you think that, the kind of the bad teams will fall like the bad teams normally fall each year?
I think Georgia's better. Like I said, I think Georgia's better than people think, and I think they're a team to kind of keep an eye on here because, obviously we know kind of what Georgia became last year. They go 6-26 and 1-17 in the league or whatever it was, and this team this year, they've already got a couple nice wins. Notre Dame, Chattanooga, not bad teams. And I think you kind of look at them and feel like there are going to be some games with Mike White, who's just coached in this league for so long now. Florida, now at Georgia, I think they're going to be okay. I don't see them being an NCAA tournament team or anything like that, but I think they could be a little bit better than people think. Some of the other teams, let's call it what it is. I think Vanderbilt and South Carolina are clearly the bottom 2 teams, and I don't really see a lot of upside there for either one of them. Ole Miss has been a little disappointing. I don't really know what to expect from them. I think A&M is probably the team that you circle and say, remember what happened last year where they didn't get to the NCAA tournament? You thought maybe they'd come out this year and kind of put something together, kind of a revenge tour or something, but man, that's just not happened. 6-5, they've had some, pretty rough losses in non-conference play, and their non-conference schedule was not necessarily great. It was better than it was last year. But I look at them, and they're another one where it's just, I think my opinion on them is flipped a little bit. I don't really see the upside with the Aggies at this point. So I really do think you're looking at a league that at best probably gets 6 teams into the tournament. And that's where, with the rest of that group, teams you think could exceed expectations. I think it goes back to, like we said, Missouri, Mississippi State, teams like that. Florida, I just don't know about Florida. But I think you throw Florida, LSU, teams like that is maybe that next tier of teams that they could get into the conversation.
Conference play begins tomorrow night across the SEC. Blake Lovell doing great work with Southeastern14.com. You can also check out their content there on YouTube. Blake, really appreciate you hopping on with us, talking some SEC basketball. We will do it again real soon. But appreciate your time today.
Sounds great, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blake.
Always good to talk with Blake Lovell about some SEC basketball. Very knowledgeable on SEC basketball, but excited to get conference play started tomorrow night. And we'll talk with Chris Stewart tomorrow afternoon here on the show as he'll be getting ready for Alabama and Mississippi State tomorrow night. And we'll talk with some football with Chris as well. But I'm excited to see what Alabama can do in conference play, as a lot of people think maybe this could be the tie, another SEC kind of championship caliber team for Alabama.
Yeah, they've already played a lot of really big time opponents. So you have a nice gauge as to where they are. There are some questions about some of the teams, Auburn being a good example of this, where you just don't know where they are based on their non-conference schedule. You have a pretty good grasp that Arkansas is going to be really good this year, that Tennessee is going to be really good. Then there's some question marks. Bama to me doesn't have a question mark. Bama to me seems like when they're firing at all cylinders, outside of injury, they're in a really good spot. Now, they have a really tough game to get conference play started against Mississippi State, and we'll see how they handle that challenge.
Yes, we will. We will jump to a break right now, and we'll talk some NFL on the other side of this break. Brad Logan of Inside the Rebels 24/7 joins us at 3:30. All of that is ahead. Stick around.
The Department of Labor
We'll continue on WKXX Live, Fox Sports 1029. Jason Gerhard here with you. Some news out of the NFL today. J.J. Watt announces that this is his last season in the NFL. He will be retiring, and of course now he's with the Cardinals right now. They have a couple of games left. They had their final home game this weekend. They have road trips up ahead with the Falcons and the 49ers. But he is he's announcing his retirement, and this will be it for J.J. Watt.
Kind of surprising, a little surprising. He has a lot left in the tank. If you just watch the way he played on Sunday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you could tell he could still play this game and play at a really high level. Now, I know he's been a little bit deflated there in Arizona. Expectations were really high for that team. They brought in some veterans. You thought that they had a chance to make a run at the Rams and make a run at the NFC, and that just never materialized. But this caps off just an incredible career. And actually, he's got 2 road games left. One of them, he's right next door in Atlanta. So, I mean, you get a chance to see J.J. Watt play one of his last games. If this is one of his last games, we've seen guys retire and then come back into the league. Until that happens, I'm not saying it's going to, but you have to say that he's probably one of the most dominant players defensively of his generation. And probably if you extend it past that, you don't make a list too long without putting J.J. Watt on there as far as dominant defenders. And so kind of shocking news today. And I hate the way it's kind of gone out because the team has been so bad given the circumstances, given the evidence of what this team could be and the way he's playing. Yeah.
So J.J. Watt, as of now, has announced he is retiring from the NFL. This will be his final season. Couple of games left on the schedule there. One in Atlanta, one in Tampa for the Arizona Cardinals. Well, last night we had the Chargers and the Colts Monday Night Football. The Chargers win 20-3 against the Indianapolis Colts. Big win for the Chargers as they'll now have a spot in the playoffs. We learned that once again, Jeff Saturday is not Jeff Monday.
And one of the things that I learned, and you hopped on this last week, you're never, ever picking the Colts again as long as Jeff Saturday is their head coach. And I think I've joined the team here. Just an abysmal performance by the Indianapolis Colts at home, scoring 3 points. They benched Matt Ryan. Nick Foles comes in. He's not that much better. Those 3 interceptions in the game. But the Chargers get to where they want to be. They obviously wanted to be in a situation where they're in the playoffs. This team felt way too good to be not in the playoffs for a very long time. And so now they're back. They solidified themselves back in the playoffs after, kind of a disappointing last couple of years. So that to me is kind of the story of this one, not necessarily the Colts. I mean, the Colts, them not making it is bad, but they were 1 game away from not making it last year. The owner, probably a knee-jerk reaction, goes and gets rid of Carson Wentz and then fires Frank Wright in the middle of the year. This team has seemingly been on free fall for a while. And I'm not saying they quit. I'm not saying they're soft, but at 4-9 with no chance of the playoffs and Nick Foles, your backup quarterback in and scoring 3 points, all the signs kind of point to this team's thinking about vacation.
Yeah. Well, it was a good day for the Chargers, getting that 20-3 win, and it was a good team win as they've seen some improvement over the last few weeks, and now they're heading to the playoffs. A couple of players spoke to that last night, including Brandon Staley.
Yeah, Coach Staley is one of those guys, in my opinion, he's a defensive guy, but he's got some pretty good analysis as it relates to his players that play on offense. They have a really talented offensive squad. They've had some injuries, a fair share of injuries with guys like Keenan Allen, guys like Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. But the bridge has been their quarterback and Justin Herbert. We'll hear from him in a while. But Staley he's been really solid about this team and about the way that they want to continue to play football and the way they got them to play where they're now in position to go to the playoffs.
I think the reason why we're here is because of the men on our football team, coaches, players. We've got the makeup to withstand the type of season that we've had, and I think that we would not be here today if it weren't for the toughness of our football team, the makeup of our football team. And I think for far too long, people have talked about the talent of this football team and the organization. And that's ultimately not what gets you where you want to go. You have to prove your toughness. And that's what we've proven so far this year, is that we have a tough enough football team mentally and physically to be where we are right now, which is in the tournament. But our season is not over. We have 2 more games against really, really good teams. And we need to search to play our best football so we can, not only get into the playoffs, but, make a run to a Super Bowl championship, which is what our goal is. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm certainly proud of everybody in that locker room because today was a great day for our team.
Brandon Staley there as the Chargers get to win over the Colts with the help of Justin Herbert. They're the quarterback there for the Chargers, and we've seen him have do really well this year, in past years as well. Kind of made a name for himself in the National Football League, and now after that win in Monday Night Football, they get to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, we're seeing the explosion of some of these young quarterbacks, Justin Herbert being one, Trevor Lawrence being one as well. But for Herbert, it just seemed that he was last year the best quarterback in the league to not make the playoffs. It just kind of felt like that every year where he got close, but he couldn't ever get there. They lost to the Raiders. But he talks about it kind of yesterday's perspective of being able to knock off the Indianapolis Colts, but then also from a big picture perspective, being able to get to the playoffs and just the amount of hard work it took for the entire team to get to that point.
I think it's a great sign for all the hard work that we put in this year, and we've definitely dealt with our adversity, our fair share. But, the story of the day was the defense stepping up big time, getting those stops, and, there's plenty of room for improvement for our offense. But, it's a good sign for us of things to come. I don't think we've played our best football yet. I think the defense has done an incredible job these past couple of weeks. I think offensively we can be better. We can limit turnovers, and that starts with me. We can, limit penalties, just being able to convert on third down and things like that. But we're definitely going to be watching the film after this one and learn from it. It's such a tough way to lose last year to the Raiders there at the end. And some games that went not our way last year, we were able to fix that this year and learn from that. And, I think those guys in that locker room, they deserve that. They've worked so hard this year and they've earned it. And so just to be a part of it, I think the Chargers organization has done such a great job these past couple of years. It didn't go our way the past 2 years, but they stuck with it, and they're doing everything they can. So it's an honor to be a part of it.
Justin Herbert there as Chargers heading to the playoffs after that win last night over the Colts. We'll talk some Ole Miss Rebels on the other side with Brad Logan of Inside the Rebels next.
The Press Box.
It is WKXX Live here on Fox Sports 102.9. Chase Robinson and Gerhard Mathangani with you as we work our way through this Tuesday afternoon as we've been keeping tabs on bowl games, the SEC teams playing in bowl games. And we're going to talk some Ole Miss Rebels football now as we welcome on Brad Logan, contributor to Inside the Rebels on 24/7 Sports, also the Believe in Ole Miss podcast. Brad, appreciate your time this afternoon. How are you?
Man, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I know the Ole Miss Rebels gearing up for the Texas Bowl as getting ready to take on Texas Tech there. Where do you see this Ole Miss team at right now, heading into the bowl game? Obviously, not really the way they wanted to end the regular season, but where do you see this team at right now heading into this game?
It's an interesting question. I think more than anything, you just don't want to finish the season losing your final 3 games. And that's kind of what happened after Ole Miss dropped the Egg Bowl. I mean, everybody kind of remembers watching that one on Thanksgiving. Ole Miss had an opportunity to tie the game up, went for 2, and Mississippi State made a nice play. And then at the end of the day, you lose your final 3 games. This is a team that started off 7-0 and eventually got to 7-1 after LSU beat Ole Miss. You know, a lot of folks will remember that Ole Miss actually was winning that LSU game 17-0. And I know a lot of folks there in Alabama remember the Ole Miss-Alabama game where the Rebels had an opportunity to go down at the end of the game, score, and possibly kick the extra point to win. But you know what? Alabama made the plays and sacked quarterback Jackson Dart. And so Ole Miss had some opportunities to have a special season. Absolutely didn't happen that way. So you're playing in the Texas Bowl. It's kind of a midweek game. It's a middle-tier bowl. It's in between New Year's and Christmas, and obviously not the ideal spot. But I think Ole Miss is probably going to do its best to make the best of it. The good news is head coach Lane Kiffin met with the media yesterday, pointed out there'd be no bowl opt-outs, excluding all the transfers that have entered the portal. So that's good news. You've got running back Zach Evans, and then, of course, All-American freshman running back Quinshon Judkins. The good news for the Rebels is when those 2 guys have been healthy, they've been very difficult for defenses to stop. It's been a really nice 1-2 punch. But defensively, Ole Miss has been just full to the pass down the stretch, and we'll see what that secondary is going to be able to do. Played pretty well in the front half of the schedule. Obviously, that competition picked up the back half of the schedule, and as we know, Ole Miss struggled down the stretch. Had a couple of transfer portal commitments over the last couple of days, so that's kind of jolted some enthusiasm back in the program. So I think, along with everyone listening to the program and myself, we're going to be kind of looking to see, is this going to be an enthusiastic team? Lane Kiffin says that the team's excited about playing. I guess we'll see soon enough tomorrow night.
For sure. Brad, Gerhard here. I'm curious, now that the dust is settled with the whole Auburn situation, and we saw the way that transpired in real time with the reports there out of the state of Mississippi and whatnot, did any of that have anything to do with the way the team played towards the end of the year, or do you think it's just isolated to what happened between the white lines?
Well, everything kind of cranked up after the 3-point win in College Station that Ole Miss was able to get. And then, obviously, from that point forward, we know that Ole Miss lost to Arkansas and Mississippi State down the stretch. So I think once kind of the scuttlebutt, if you will, kind of started up, I think that obviously has something to do with how Ole Miss kind of fell down the stretch. So at one point, you know, guys, Ole Miss was down 42-6 to Arkansas and Fayetteville. Now, this is not a place, Fayetteville, where Ole Miss has played well. A program that has done well against the Rebels at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, and a place that Ole Miss hadn't won and still hasn't won since 2008. So Ole Miss fans knew that it was going to be difficult to go on the road and play a team like Arkansas. Obviously, it proved to be pivotal, and we know what happened the following week whenever Ole Miss fell to Mississippi State. I don't think there's any doubt that the Rebels played better at home against Mississippi State, but more importantly, they played really poor against Arkansas, and I think that had definitely had something to do with that loss down the stretch. Eventually, Lane Kiffin would come out and say that he's committed to Ole Miss. Unfortunately, that happened the week after the Egg Bowl.
We're talking with Brad Logan, talking some Ole Miss football. The matchup with Texas Tech tomorrow night. What challenges do you believe Texas Tech will bring to this game for Ole Miss?
Well, I think one good part is the Red Raider defense is number 90 in the country in stopping the run. So I think that's one good part that Ole Miss can possibly take advantage of. And I think you'll see a lot of Ole Miss early from Jackson Dart, quarterback, and, of course, running back Zach Evans, who's very familiar with this Texas Tech program, a resident there of the state of Texas, who transferred in from TCU, highly decorated five-star product. And, of course, Quinshon Judkins, the freshman All-American. So I think the Rebels will be able to take advantage of the running game. But I do like Texas Tech's passing defense. And I think that's one thing that Jackson Dart's going to have to be careful of. Early on, he threw a number of interceptions, but he kind of calmed that down in the latter part of the season. But Ole Miss's defense, specifically at linebacker and defensive back, they're going to have their hands full. As Texas Tech goes to the air, they've got a really good passing attack. They've got 3 season-wide receivers that Ole Miss is probably going to have a hard time stopping. Also, this team, like Texas Tech, they scored 63 points against Murray State. They're also a team that can win in very close ball games. They played 3 overtime games, one of those double OT games. One of those, of course, was against Oklahoma, one of their rivalries. They won all 3 games, and so that's something Ole Miss is going to have its hands full. A team that likes to play close, they like to throw it, and those are 2 things that Ole Miss has kind of struggled with this year, stopping the pass for sure.
Yeah, and it seems to me that what you're saying is because Texas Tech throws the ball really well and because Ole Miss has run the ball really well, it'll actually be better if Ole Miss could shorten the game up and keep their offense on the field, run the ball, as you said, with Evans and Judkins. Do you believe that would be the game plan going in?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that offensive coordinator Charlie Wise Jr., along with Lane Kiffin, their best defense is keeping that Texas Tech offense off the field. That means we're going to see a senior-laden offensive line for Ole Miss, a ground-and-pound game. I expect to see Ole Miss come and run the ball early and often. And the good news, if you're an Ole Miss fan, is that you got Zach Evans, who's going to be probably entering the NFL draft. He's going to use this game as a bit of a stepping stone to that draft. It's going to be a bit of a dress rehearsal, if you will. And I think you'll see dollar amounts. And, the harder he plays, the more chances he gets to run the football and possibly have a big game on the ground. That's just going to help him, help his draft stock. So I don't think there's any doubt about it. Ole Miss is going to do its best to try to run the ball, and that should open up that passing game for Ole Miss. They haven't had any receivers other than maybe a Jonathan Mingo or transfer Malik Heath from Mississippi State that has really stepped up this year. That's one disappointing spot for Ole Miss. But those 2 receivers have been really big, and when they do throw it, I expect them to throw to those 2 receivers.
We're talking with Brad Logan, talking some Ole Miss Rebels. I want to talk recruiting for just a second. You mentioned they've had some additions out of the portal the last couple of days. Early signing day last Wednesday. What did you make of the class that Lane Kiffin brought in the early signing period?
I thought the quality of the player was really good. The problem with Ole Miss is the quantity. They only signed 11 players. They really needed to sign about 16 or 17 high school players. Once again, Ole Miss did a really good job by securing some great talent, specifically the number 1 player in Mississippi, a 4-star linebacker, Suntarine Perkins, along with a number of other players in the state of Mississippi. I thought they did really well. Jakevius Brown, a defensive tackle out of Moss Point, Mississippi. Once again, the problem is that they didn't get a number of players that they need, so that means that it's going to put even more pressure on Lane Kiffin to hit the portal. The good news is Ole Miss hit the portal really well last year. The bad news is it seems like there's a number of other teams throughout the country that are utilizing that portal, so now that's going to put more pressure on Kiffin. They did get a transfer receiver out of Texas A&M over the last couple of days, along with a transfer wide receiver from La Tech, Trey Harris, who has had a really good season for for Louisiana Tech. So they did hit the portal pretty hard. There are a number of other players that they're looking at. I thought it was a pretty good recruiting cycle, the early signing period. You've got February coming up. They're going to need to hit that portal hard, and there are about 5 or 6 high school players that are still out there trying to get signed. So it has a chance to be really good. Right now, I'd say it's kind of average, but the opportunity exists to have a really good class after February for sure.
Yeah, and what I found interesting about the recruiting class is that Lane wasn't able to secure a quarterback. Do you believe that's because he thinks he will be able to get something going in the transfer portal, much like he did with Jackson Dart?
I think so, and then you've also got a quarterback in Luke Altmaier that's entered the transfer portal but did make the trip to Texas. So I think they're kind of trying to recruit him to get out of the portal and become a steady Jackson Dart's backup. Obviously, Marcel Reed, the 4-star quarterback out of Nashville, Brentwood Academy, committed to Ole Miss back in April. Ole Miss had him all the way up to signing day. He flips a couple nights before. Jimbo Fisher comes in home. and obviously the NIL presented a problem for Ole Miss, so he committed to Texas A&M. That left Ole Miss without a committed quarterback in the high school ranks or the portal ranks. So I don't think there's any doubt that Ole Miss is going to go to the portal and try to get a quarterback to come in here, because right now you've got a quarterback that graduated in Kincaid Dent. You've got a quarterback in Jackson Dart that's a true sophomore that's going to be ready to roll. But then you've got no other backup quarterbacks other than about 3 walk-on quarterbacks. There's no doubt that was a big bitter pill to swallow when Marcel Reed committed and then ultimately signed with Texas A&M. So Ole Miss has got to do something to get a quarterback in here by spring.
Good stuff from Brad Logan, contributor to Inside the Rebels on 24/7 Sports, as well as the Believe in Ole Miss podcast. Brad, really appreciate you coming on, talking some Rebels football with us this afternoon. We'll have to talk again soon, but appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Brad Logan there, covering Ole Miss football, joins us here on WKXX Live. Interesting matchup tomorrow night. We'll see if Ole Miss is ready to play. He mentioned not the way you wanted to end. 3 straight losses to end your season. Now you have a midweek, mid-tier bowl in the Texas Bowl. Not where we thought Ole Miss would be.
Well, especially after the start that they had, not just the fact that they, I think they ran the record to 8-0 or 7-0 to begin the season, but they looked unstoppable. 7-0 to start the year before losing to LSU. I mean, they looked really, really good, and they had the run game really going. Jackson Dart looked really comfortable after they settled in on him instead of Luke Altmaier. But yeah, we knew the schedule would get tough, but we didn't think at one point they'd be down to Arkansas 45-6 towards the end of the year. So redemption, I'm sure, is a big part of what they're doing here in this game against Texas Tech. But I found it really interesting because as he was laying out the situations for the two teams coming in, there was a point in time you say Ole Miss and Texas Tech are playing a football game, you're going to think, oh, well, that's going to be a basketball score before it's all said and done because both teams will be flying up and down the field. But Ole Miss actually has a really good running game this time around. NFL caliber running back, the All-American and SEC Freshman of the Year at running back in Judkins. And so this could be a really different scheme from what we're used to seeing from an Ole Miss team that usually likes to gun it, but now they'll be packing it in.
Yep, and appreciate Brad Logan taking time to join us, talk some Ole Miss Rebels Texas Bowl coming up tomorrow night. We'll jump to a break here. We'll wrap up the Tuesday edition of the show next, talking some NFL. And if you want to get a phone call in, we'll have time for that next. 256-413-1029.
Gargis & Son
It is WKXX Live, Fox Sports 102.9. Jason Gerhard here with you. 256-413-1029 is our number, 256-413-1029, if you'd like to call in and be a part of the show. Let's look at the NFL power rankings as we do on Tuesdays, see where everybody's shaking out here as we finish up another week. Hard to believe we're getting towards the tail end of the NFL season, but what do the power rankings look like?
Yeah, 15 games in of the 17 games we'll play. All the teams have 2 more games coming up over the next couple of weeks, and it's really interesting. Normally with these power rankings, to kind of bounce around from different organizations and get a look at it, but I think now just about everybody has the same top 5 as we kind of close out the season. At number 1, the San Francisco 49ers jumping up 1 spot from number 2. This team just looks unstoppable right now. I mean, they have a third-string quarterback, and it seems like they still are just clicking on all cylinders. Brock Purdy and company are at number 1. The San Francisco 49ers are 11-4 on the year. Number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles looked really good in their last game against the Dallas Cowboys, but they, of course, got into a situation where they were with their backup quarterback and Gardner Minshew, lost that football game. They're now 13-2. They slipped 1 spot from 1 to 2. Meanwhile, at number 3, the Buffalo Bills remain at number 3, 12-3 on the season. The Cincinnati Bengals also remain at number 4, 11-4 on the year. Kansas City Chiefs remain at 5. I think for the most part, most organizations have those 5 as the best football teams right now in the NFL. I don't really have much beef with that. At number 6, the Dallas Cowboys, also 11-4 on the year. The Minnesota Vikings, after that crazy comeback a couple of weeks ago, got another win last week, and they ended up bumping up 1 spot from number 8 up to number 7 at 12-3 on the season. The LA Chargers, after clinching the playoff spot, as we talked about a couple of segments ago, 9-6 so far on the year. They've looked really good, especially here lately. They're at number 8, up 1 spot. The Jacksonville Jaguars. How about this team? The only team in the top 10 with a losing record going into their this week. They're 7-8 on the year, but nobody can argue that they're not playing really good football right now. They jump up 2 spots from number 11 to number 9. They're 7-8 on the season. The top 10 rounds out with the Baltimore Ravens at 10-5. They're at number 10, up 2 spots. They've played a couple of weeks since Lamar Jackson's got hurt, and so far, so good. You see teams lose their starting quarterback, and they lose a couple of games, but the Baltimore Ravens have just been humming. 10-5 so far on the year. At number 11, another team that has a loss on their record, or a losing record, I should say, the Detroit Lions at number 11 at 7-8 so far on the year. Same record for the Green Bay Packers, who come in at number 12, jump up 5 spots to number 12. Still working a little bit with the outside shot there at the playoffs. The Miami Dolphins are 8-7, ranked number 13, followed by the New York Giants at number 14, 8-6-1. At number 15, the New York Jets at 7-8 on the year. Number 16, dead middle of the NFL, the Washington Commanders, 7-1. Pittsburgh Steelers are 7-8. They're at number 17, followed by the New England Patriots, who are also 7-8, lost a couple of brutal games. They're at number 18, remaining in that position. The Carolina Panthers, looking to sneak up on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are at number 19. It's pretty interesting that I haven't said Tampa Bay yet. Tampa Bay actually ranks behind the Carolina Panthers. Both the Panthers are 6-9. The Bucs are at 7-8. They needed a last-second field goal to get a win in overtime over the Arizona Cardinals. The Raiders are at 6-9 at number 21, followed by the Seattle Seahawks at number 22 at 7-8. Number 23, the New Orleans Saints, still an outside chance there with the Panthers and the Bucs to claim a spot in the playoffs at number 23. Tennessee Titans have really fallen off, especially after the injury to Ryan Tannehill. He's done for the year. They were the number 1 seed last year. A big fall off this year at number 24 at 7-8. LA Rams, last year's Super Bowl winner, 5-10 on the season, ranked number 25, followed by the Cleveland Browns at number 26. The Houston Texans are at number 27. Got a win last week. They move up from now to 12-1. That's still the funniest record so far in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons slipped 2 spots to number 28 at 5-10. At number 29, you got the Chicago Bears remain in that position at 3-12. The Arizona Cardinals are at number 30 at 4-11. Your favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts, led by Jeff Saturday, the second to last team in the league at number 31 at 4-10-1, and the very last team in the NFL, and I don't think you can really have much beef about this one, the Denver Broncos, who have just looked atrocious, considering the fact that they're paying Russell Wilson $250 million. Number 32, 4-12 overall after that 51-14 shellacking at the hands of the LA Rams. That is your top 32 in the NFL this week.
Yeah. Who do you think and I'm sure we won't see a coach fired until the end of the season now. Who do you think the next coach is to go?
I think right now on the hot seat, and I hate to say this because I think he's done a really good job, and I think the ownership might like him enough to keep him around for another year. Arthur Smith for the Falcons. Maybe because you have a young quarterback, you keep him around for another year. I just don't know if I see anybody else because the Saints just hired a new guy, and they're on the cusp of the playoffs. The Titans aren't getting rid of Mike Vrabel going into this season. I know it's been harsh for them. The Seahawks aren't getting rid of Pete Carroll. I think that Josh McDaniels gets another year with the Las Vegas Raiders, considering their struggles. Does the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, do they part ways with Todd Bowles after this year? Not sure. Carolina Panthers, obviously, with the interim quarterback as we stand right now. Bill Belichick's not going anywhere unless he steps down. Same thing with Mike Tomlin. So I think all the teams that probably are going to give their guy another year. A guy I'd be interested in, just the situation, the way it's played out the last couple of years, and the turmoil of the organization overall, is Coach Rivera with the Washington Commanders. I don't know if they do so, but there's been so much noise with that program in and outside of the football stadium. We'll see, because normally a lot of times the scapegoat becomes the head coach. But with the record they have right now and the outside shot of the playoffs, I don't see it happening. So I think we've seen the ones that'll get fired right now. And I'll be surprised, but we still have 2 more games. So if teams slip and see something better on the horizon, we could see some moves late.
So the NFL season, we're getting closer to wrapping it up here for the regular season. Should be a fun playoffs, I think, though, coming up in a few weeks as well. And hey, remember, we got Jacksonville State basketball coming up for you tonight. 6 o'clock is tip-off between Jacksonville State and Georgia Southwestern. 5:30 airtime with Mike Paris of the Gamecock Sports Network. We will be back with you tomorrow as J.D. Piquel will join us tomorrow from On3 Sports, talking some college football with us, transfer portal, playoffs, all that good stuff. And Chris Stewart of the Crimson Tide Sports Network, voice of the Crimson Tide men's basketball and football for this year. He'll join us tomorrow afternoon as well to preview Alabama-Mississippi State basketball and Alabama-Kansas State football. That is coming your way tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.
Fox Sports